You're standing on a frozen beach in the year 1014. The wind off the Atlantic cuts through your cloak like a blade. You watch your Earl, Sigurd the Stout, pull a black raven banner from his chest and tuck it against his heart. Around you, men are screaming, dying, drowning in the surf at Clontarf. The banner was woven by a sorceress with a promise: victory for the army, death for the man who carries it. 3 men have already fallen holding that cloth. Now your Earl has become the 4th standard-bearer. You see the spear enter his ribs. You see him fall. And in that moment, you realize something terrifying. The age of magic is ending. But the age of the Orkney Vikings is just beginning. Before we dive into one of history's most overlooked empires, I'd love to hear where you're watching from. Drop a comment below. It amazes me that we can gather from every corner of the world to explore these hidden chapters of our shared past. And if you enjoy these deep historical dives, hitting that like button helps this story reach others who hunger for the truth beneath the legends. This is the story of the Orkney Vikings. It's not the ones you know from movies. Not the raiders who burned monasteries for silver and sailed home. These were different. These were the Vikings who stayed, who built, created an empire that spanned from Dublin to the Norwegian coast. An empire that terrified 3 kingdoms. An empire ruled from a collection of windswept rocks so strategically placed that whoever controlled them controlled the throat of the North Atlantic. For 5 centuries, the Earls of Orkney operated as a rogue state, bowing to no king, answering to no law but their own. They were kingmakers and kinslayers, sorcerers and saints. And their story has been buried beneath the more glamorous tales of Ragnar Lothbrok and Harald Hardrada. But the Orkney Vikings were the ones who actually succeeded. They didn't die in glorious defeat. They won. They ruled. They endured. And it all began with a lie and 40 horses. The year is 890. A Scottish warlord named Mael Brit waits on the mainland for a peace summit. The terms are sacred, sworn on both sides. 40 men from each party, mounted on 40 horses, to negotiate a border dispute. No armies, no treachery. When the Viking Earl Sigurd the Mighty appears on the horizon, Mael Brit counts the horses carefully. 1, 2, 3. 40 exactly. He signals his men to lower their weapons. But as the Vikings ride closer, the ground begins to shake harder than 40 horses should cause. Mael Brit squints at the saddles, and his blood turns to ice. There are 2 sets of legs hanging from every horse. Sigurd has strapped a second warrior behind each rider. It isn't 40 men coming to negotiate. It's 80 heavy cavalry coming to slaughter. The massacre lasts minutes. Mael Brit's honor guard is hacked to pieces on open ground. He's dragged to his knees in the mud, and Sigurd himself swings the axe. But Sigurd isn't satisfied with just winning. He decapitates his enemy and straps the severed head to his saddle as a trophy, riding away in triumph with the dead man's face bouncing against his leg. It's the ultimate display of Viking dominance. But Sigurd has made a fatal mistake. He's forgotten that a corpse is a biological weapon. As Sigurd gallops home, celebrating his victory, the head of Mael Brit swings violently against his calf. The dead man's bucktooth, still intact in the skull, scratches Sigurd's skin. Just a graze, nothing more. But in the 9th century, there are no antibiotics. There is only fate. Bacteria from the rotting mouth enters Sigurd's bloodstream. Within days, his leg swells grotesquely. The fever takes him. The conqueror of the Scottish mainland dies delirious and rotting, killed not by an army, but by a dead man's tooth. The first Earl of Orkney has learned the hardest lesson of all. In these islands, even the dead bite back. Sigurd's death creates a vacuum, and in the Viking world, vacuums fill with blood. The earldom passes through hands like a cursed crown. Sigurd's son dies mysteriously. Some say naturally, others whisper of poison. The title reverts to Norway, to the sons of Ragnaveld, a powerful jarl and friend of King Harald Fair. And here the saga introduces one of history's most unlikely rulers, His name is Einar. He's the youngest son, born to a slave woman, described as ugly, one-eyed, and thoroughly unloved by his father. When the chaos in Orkney demands a new leader, Ragnvald looks at his bastard son and essentially says, "You go. If you die there, I won't mourn." Einar sails west as an exile, arriving in a land that presents an impossible challenge. Orkney is strategic, yes, sitting at the crossroads of every major Viking trade route. But it's also cursed by its own geography. The wind is so relentless that trees cannot grow. Without timber, you cannot build ships. You cannot build halls. You cannot create the hot fires needed to forge weapons or survive winter. Most warlords would see Orkney as a frozen wasteland, a strategic position rendered useless by nature. But Einar possesses something rare among Viking warriors, an engineer's mind. He looks at the boggy, waterlogged ground everyone else ignores and sees salvation. He teaches the islanders to cut the earth itself, harvesting thick layers of compressed peat from the bogs. He shows them how to dry it, stack it, burn it. It seems mundane, almost laughable compared to tales of dragon ships and battle glory. But this is revolution. Peat burns hot and slow. Suddenly, Orkney has unlimited fuel. The energy crisis is solved. The islands can sustain a permanent population, build forges, survive winters. Einar's innovation is so transformative that history renames him. He becomes Torfnir, the man who taught the North to burn the earth. With his people warm and fed, Einar turns his attention to consolidation. But his stability is threatened by the deadliest enemy imaginable: royal jealousy. King Harald Fairhair has unified Norway through conquest, but his many sons are spoiled. Violent princes who roam the seas like wolves. Two of these princes, envious of Orkney's growing wealth, murder Einar's father in Norway and then sail west to seize the islands for themselves. The confrontation comes in winter, when the storms isolate the archipelago from the mainland. One of the king's sons, Halfdan Longleg, arrives with an army and forces Einar to flee to Scotland. But Einar is playing a longer game. He waits for the worst of winter, for the ice and darkness, and then returns with a surprise night raid. He captures Halfdan Longleg alive on the island of North Ronaldsay. Think about the political calculation here. Einar is a bastard earl, ruling a remote island chain. Halfdan is the son of the most powerful king in Scandinavia. The rational move is ransom. Return the prince for gold, secure peace, survive. But Einar doesn't want peace. He wants to send a message so brutal that no king will ever threaten his islands again. According to the Orkney saga, Einar performs the blood eagle on the royal captive. Historians have debated for centuries whether this ritual execution was real or literary embellishment. But the saga describes it with chilling anatomical precision. Einar forces Halfdan to kneel, severs the ribs from the spine with a blade, and pulls the lungs out through the wounds, draping them over the shoulders like wings. He offers the dying prince to Odin, the god of war and madness. The message reaches Norway like a thunderclap. King Harald Fairhair hears what happened to his son and sails west with an armada, ready to annihilate the islands. But when he arrives and sees Einar's defenses, sees the determination of the Orcadians, he doesn't invade. He settles for a fine, 60 marks of gold. Einar pays it without hesitation. He has bought his independence with extreme violence, and the price was worth it. Under Torfnir, the Orkney Islands transform from a pirate outpost into something more organized, more dangerous. A sustainable military state. They develop a hybrid culture, intermarrying with Scottish nobility, creating an aristocracy that's part Norse raider, part Celtic warrior. They're no longer just Norwegians abroad. They're Orcadians, a new people with a new identity. But this stability carries the seeds of future chaos. Because, in the Viking world, peace is always temporary. Power attracts ambition. Wealth attracts envy. And by the late 10th century, a new kind of ruler emerges in Orkney. His name is Sigurd Hlodverson, known to history as Sigurd the Stout. And unlike Torfenir, who built his empire on peat and pragmatism, Sigurd builds his on something older and darker: magic. Sigurd the Stout is everything a Viking warlord should be. Physically massive, ruthless in battle, hungry for land and glory. By the end of the 10th century, he controls not just Orkney but the Hebrides, the Isle of Man, and vast territories in northern Scotland. He's essentially a king in all but name. But Sigurd's true power doesn't come from his strength. It comes from a gift his mother gave him before battle. She's rumored to be a sorceress, a daughter of an Irish king with knowledge of the old magic. When Sigurd prepares for war, she presents him with a banner she's woven herself, black cloth embroidered with a raven, the sacred bird of Odin. The prophecy is simple and terrible: victory for the army that marches behind it, death for the man who carries it. It's a transaction with fate. Sigurd accepts the bargain. In his first battle, the banner flies, the enemy breaks, and the standard-bearer falls dead. In the second battle, the same. Victory and death, inseparable. The raven banner becomes the most feared object in the North Atlantic, a symbol of Orkneys packed with forces older than Christianity. But while Sigurd is winning battles with pagan sorcery, a new kind of power is sailing from the east. King Olaf Tryggvason of Norway is a Christian zealot determined to convert the Viking world by sword and sermon. In 995, he arrives in Orkney harbor with a fleet and invites Sigurd aboard his ship for negotiations. It's a trap. Surrounded by armed guards, Olaf gives Sigurd an ultimatum: convert to Christianity and bring all your subjects with you, or die right here, and I will burn these islands to ash. To ensure compliance, Olaf seizes Sigurd's young son as hostage. Sigurd looks at the armada surrounding him, looks at his son, and makes the calculation every pragmatic ruler eventually faces. He bends his knee. The baptism water touches his forehead, but according to the saga, his heart remains stone. He converts politically, but not spiritually. This tension between old gods and new faith simmers until 1014, the year of the Battle of Clontarf in Ireland. It's one of the great coalition wars of the Viking Age, the High King of Ireland, Brian Boru, against a rebel alliance of Dublin Vikings and Norse mercenaries. Sigurd sails to Ireland with his fleet and, of course, the Raven Banner. On Good Friday, April 23rd, the armies meet on the shore near Dublin. The battle is apocalyptic. Men fight in the surf, drowning in blood and salt water. And in the chaos, the curse of the banner activates. The first man to carry Sigurd's standard falls immediately, cut down by Irish blades. Sigurd orders a second warrior to raise it. Within moments, he's killed. A third man picks it up and dies. The pattern is undeniable. Sigurd calls to one of his veteran warriors, Hroth the Red, to take the banner. But Hroth has been watching. He refuses. Bear your own devil yourself. Sigurd the Stout stands alone in the center of the shield wall. The battle is turning against him. His men are dying. The banner lies in the mud, that black cloth his mother wove with such terrible certainty. He has a choice: abandon it and retreat, possibly survive, or fulfill the prophecy. Sigurd picks up the banner, tears it from the staff, and tucks it inside his armor. He becomes the standard-bearer. Almost instantly, a spear finds him, then a sword. The great Earl of Orkney falls on Irish soil, the Raven banner pressed against his heart. His army is destroyed. The Irish king Brian Boru also dies that day, killed by fleeing Vikings in his tent. Clontarf isn't just a battle. It's the end of an era. The age of the pagan Viking warlord dies with Sigurd. The overt magic, the deals with dark gods, the blood sacrifices, all of it fades into memory. But Orkney's power doesn't end. It evolves. Sigurd's death creates a succession crisis that makes a Shakespearean tragedy look tame. He leaves behind 4 sons. 3 are grown Norse warriors, ready to tear each other apart for control. But the 4th is different. His name is Thorfinn. He's only 5 years old. And his mother isn't Norse. She's a Scottish princess, daughter of King Malcolm II of Scotland. This mixed bloodline changes everything. While his older brothers fight over the barren rocks of Orkney, young Thorfinn is sent south to the Scottish court, raised not as a pirate, but as a prince. He learns statecraft, diplomacy, continental politics. When he finally returns to Orkney as a young man, he's not just a warlord. He's a strategic genius. The sagas describe Thorfinn as physically unimpressive, short and ugly, with sharp features and black hair. He doesn't look like a golden-haired Norse god, but inside that rough exterior is a mind that understands something his ancestors never fully grasped. To rule the North Sea, you can't just be a raider, you have to be an emperor. Thorfinn consolidates power ruthlessly, forcing his surviving brothers into submission. Then he turns south, toward the fragmented clans of Scotland, and sees opportunity. The Scottish king Duncan demands tribute from Orkney's holdings in northern Scotland. Thorfinn doesn't send gold, he sends a fleet. The climax comes in a naval battle off the coast of Deerness. Outnumbered, Thorfinn lashes his ships together, creating a floating fortress. He personally boards King Duncan's flagship and clears the deck with an axe. Duncan flees and is later killed. Whether Thorfinn delivers the final blow or his cousin Macbeth does, the result is the same. The Scottish crown is shattered. Some historians believe Thorfinn and Macbeth are the same person, or at least that Thorfinn inspired Shakespeare's famous tragedy. The timelines align, the territories match. The enemy, King Duncan, is identical. While Shakespeare gave us 3 witches and a dagger, the real history gives us something more complex. A half-Scottish, half-Norse warlord who bridges 2 worlds and dominates both. At the height of his power, Thorfinn controls an empire that stretches from Dublin to the Norwegian coast. He rules 9 separate earldoms in Scotland, the entire Hebrides, the Isle of Man, and of course, Orkney itself. He governs more of Scotland than the King of Scotland does. But the most shocking display of his power isn't military. It's his vacation. In 1050, at the peak of his strength, Thorfinn does something unprecedented for a Viking warlord. He stops fighting and goes on pilgrimage to Rome. Imagine the sight. This short, ugly giant from the frozen north, walking through the sun-drenched streets of Italy, meeting with the Pope, likely encountering the Holy Roman Emperor. This isn't just religious atonement, though he has plenty to atone for. This is a diplomatic masterstroke. By being received by the Pope, Thorfinn is declaring to all of Europe, I am not a barbarian. I am a Christian monarch, equal to any king on this continent. He returns to Orkney transformed. The savage warrior becomes a state builder. He founds the first bishopric in Orkney, constructing a magnificent church at Bursay. He begins to separate church and state, laying groundwork for a civilized society that will outlast the raids and the blood feuds. And here's the remarkable thing. Thorfinn the Mighty dies in his bed. An old man, surrounded by family and priests, the undisputed master of his world. In Viking sagas, this is almost unheard of. Most heroes die screaming in snake pits or bleeding on battlefields. But Thorfinn wins. He builds. He endures. He creates something that lasts. But his empire presents an impossible logistical challenge. How do you maintain a fleet of hundreds of warships on islands with no trees? How do you feed an army that spans from Dublin to Norway? The answer lies in a system so efficient, it's terrifying. The Orkney Vikings invent what might be the first naval conscription economy in Europe. The islands are divided into tax districts called ouncelands and pennylands, but the tax isn't paid in coin. It's paid in crew, in weapons, in ship maintenance. Every district is legally obligated to provide men and resources for the Jarl's fleet at a moment's notice. To solve the timber problem, they become masters of theft and recycling. They harvest driftwood from North America, carried across the Atlantic by the Gulf Stream. They raid the forests of Scotland, cutting down enemy trees to build the ships they'll use to raid again. It's a perfect predatory cycle. They also develop a surveillance network that rivals anything in the medieval world. On every island, the highest point is designated a ward hill, a beacon station. When a watchman sees a hostile sail on the horizon, he lights his fire. The signal races across the archipelago in minutes. By the time an invader lands, the beaches are already lined with armed men. It's the fiber optic network of the Dark Ages.